Thank you, everybody. And let me start with a question. Why do we become data scientists? Is it money? Is it image? Or is it love? Is it because we love working with data and gaining insights out of it? If I'm reading the room correctly, I would say it's actually love. Second question. How do we become data scientists? And I know there are 100 different stories on how we became data scientists or data people, but most stories are some version of this. There's some analytical background, you get interested in data, then you learn data science skills on your own, on a job, through a boot camp, and hopefully at that moment you really discover, wow, this is super cool, I want to continue working with data. You apply for a job, and around that time, congratulations, you are a data scientist. And what happens next? Next, you enter the job, you get very company-specific data, you start being involved in meetings and projects. And in that time, it might happen that you start forgetting where that initial spark or initial love came from. Or even worse, you continue on your career, and at some point, you really have so many other tasks that you really don't have the time to remind yourself where is that spark of love you had to work with data. And if this sounds like I'm talking about personal experiences, well, maybe. And one way I've dealt with that is by teaching. The other way is by working on so-called personal data projects, which are self-describing. And the good thing about personal data projects is that there is data available. So if you're using a smartphone, you are recording personal data all the time. So we have data available. We care about the topic and the data, where we should. It's about us and our life. And if you gain insights, they are going to be relevant because they're about your life. My first experience with personal data projects was around at the time when I was starting as a data scientist. And on this talk, I will talk about 3 different projects. The first one was in December 2016. And one fact that you should know to understand the talk is that in my family, we take the tradition of making advents calendar very, very seriously. This means in November, mid-November, you really get in this stressful phase of what am I going to do to start on the 1st of December. And December 2016, I had some ideas, and what I also had was lots of WhatsApp data. So my partner and me at that time were living in different cities. So we were talking a lot through WhatsApp. So we practically got to know each other through WhatsApp and on the weekends. So I had 36 months of WhatsApp data, and at that time I was using the R toolkit for data analysis and visualization. So I took all these 36 months, analyzed the data, and started to make plots. And what I constructed was a big A2 poster infographic with lots of different graphs from our life in emoji, annotated with things that were happening, to the distribution of words in time, of course, some word clouds, the change in languages we were using over time, because we had German, Spanish, and English going on there in the relationship. Then I made a arts and crafts project out of it, where I was really cutting Christmas wrapping paper and making little stickers out of it. And then in December, she could open one by one and discover some insights about our relationship. And at that time, I thought, well, if I already made all this work, I might as well use this for something important. And I decided to ask her to marry her with the title, and she said yes. Thanks. Fast forward, WhatsApp data has actually lost its value. I exported the data last week again to see how our usage had changed, and this is the time I made the advanced calendar. We were at that time already at a low time, at an all-time low, but this just kept decreasing. But of course, we moved in together, then the pandemic happened. We were all the time together. We didn't need WhatsApp anymore. We moved to Signal, Telegram, and so the messages really decreased. And not only the messages, the number of messages, also the content. So I made an analysis of lexical richness. And at the beginning, we were really talking about like our life philosophy, like universe, and everything. And nowadays, really, WhatsApp is like, how are you? Great, and please go to the supermarket and buy these things. Yeah, so this is what WhatsApp is used for now. So for the second project, it wasn't WhatsApp data anymore. But it was an advanced calendar. So 4 years later, again, mid-November, what shall I do for the advanced calendar? We had been 1 year into the pandemic, and the one thing that was kept more or less constant is that we were still playing lots of board games. So we have this hobby of playing board games. And we had all plays, so all games recorded in the board game stats app. At that time, I had also already changed to the Python environment. And so from all the board games we had, what happened in the pandemic is what used to be this very social thing where we would meet with friends and play became one of a 1 versus 1 situation, yeah, where we would just play lots of rounds, one against the other. So this over 500 plays are really games, one against the other. And there's this very neat board game stats app that, funny enough, I'm not the one using, yeah, so, but my partner, my wife, logs every play, yeah? And this is very handy because there's already a database. This is synced to the biggest database of board games. You choose the board game, how long you played, who won, the score, and this thing will make some graphs out of it. And the best thing about it, it has an export button. So I stole the phone, exported the data, and made a new advanced calendar out of it. A more traditional one, you know, where you have like little cards, and there you have like small cards with graphs about our board game behavior. And I have some examples for you. We really play a lot. This a lot were around 18 hours per month. That's the slope of the fitted model. Pretty steady at that time. Don't ask me how it's now. We also don't play a lot. We play very different games. So we are like the explorative players. So we like to try out many different games, either by borrowing games from neighbors or in the big eBay buy and sell board game world. And we also had the top games played by iteration. And the ones of you that know something about the topic, you see a lot of legacy games, so games that you play and you continue the story and you continue the story. Some games that are very long on its own. So we have Terraforming Mars, like 9 hours. That's like 4 times playing, so that's not so many times, but very long games. Or just games that we really, really liked a lot. Now, if you know something about the topic, then you also know that these are all competitive games. We're not the collaborative gamers. So most of the stats, in the most interesting stats were about who has won what when. And you might see that I have many more games where I was leading, but she was winning in the more complex games, which is very annoying. And we were also tied in some. And my most painful card is this graph of games I lost by 1 point in the score, really, 1 point, and how long we played. And you saw the first one, where like over 2 hours for losing for 1 point. Yeah? And you see the 4 longest games, I lost by this 1 point. So you see, it's fun. Yeah, it's personal, but it's fun, and you actually learn something out of the thing. In August that year, she had a birthday, and again, I didn't know what to get her. But what I did have was this very clean board game data, and it was very easy to actually plug that data into a classification model to predict actually the winner. And I put it in my newest favorite tool, Streamlit, to give her a website present. So this is a small data app that can predict who will win a game. We can choose from board games we've played, and then we can predict who will be the winner. We get some probability, and this is based on the stats of the game if we've played it, the time of the day and day of the week, because this also had some impact, and the properties of the game. So there's a big database of board games, Board Game Geek, and they have tags. They have the game complexity, game type, categories, mechanics. And with this information, I could also predict games we hadn't played before. Yeah, it's just a coincidence I picked examples where I would have had a high probability of winning, of course. So now every time we play, we can ask first and test the model and test how we're doing. Yes, so that was the second one. Before I start talking about the third project, which is about something with a kid. So lots of things change in your life when you have a kid. You have less time to play board games for once, but also you start wondering about decisions you're making. And for me, one of the big decisions were like, what am I doing with the data sharing? So it's one thing if I want to use some kind of app without reading the whole terms of usage, but it was another feeling for me to share data about another person, here my kid, without actually informing myself what was happening with the data. So there were many things I wanted to track, of course, when the kid was born, and I saw these beautiful visualizations in the net on sleeping patterns or lack of sleeping patterns and feeding times, etc. But I didn't want to use any of those apps. So I wasn't actually tracking anything. That was until he started talking. Because at that time, I thought, like, oh, now this is interesting data. Yeah? So he started saying his first words, growing up in a bilingual environment. And I've been working on the side for a long time with a friend of mine who's a linguistic researcher, working actually in language acquisition in bilingualism. So I knew this was interesting data. So I started tracking really with a spreadsheet, and I was writing the word and a timestamp and the language the word was in. And I was distinguishing between Spanish, German, and neutral for all names or proper names or English words that just happened to get infiltrated. And again, I used the typical data analysis and plotting tools, plus Spacey to do a bit of NLP on the words. And I did the analysis last week. So after being recording for 17 months, I finally took a look at these first 1,000 words. And what I saw first confirmed my feeling that at the beginning it was very easy to track the words. Yeah, it was like, mama, oh great, banana, okay. 2 months later, bal, and like, okay, third word, yeah. But at some point, they were like, wow, so many new words per day. And my linguistic friend explained that after between 50 and 100 words, there's this so-called vocabulary spurt. Yeah, that's when there's an acceleration in the rate at which children acquire new words. And you see this beautifully in the data, yeah, this elbow of like zoop, it starts increasing radically. And what I thought would be the most interesting content there were the languages, yeah? So here you see again in the top graph, the total amount of words, and then in the next one, the new Spanish words and the new German words per month, yeah? And at Spanish at home, we mostly speak Spanish as a family language, although it's a bit of a mixed situation. But indeed, apart from the neutral nouns, the kid was starting to first learn more Spanish words. Right now, or yeah, at 26 months, German had caught up, and now it's actually more German words than Spanish words. But the other interesting thing about that data set is that we were in this pandemic context. So the linguistic context of the children was very constant, apart from like few changes. And very funnily, we can see these changes in the tic-tac patterns that we see. Because you see the first graph, so it's very linear. So the amount of new words is more or less the same, but you see these peaks in the Spanish and German words. The first change happened when we changed the one who was staying at home more with him. And there we see he was very quickly learning Spanish words, and then the German-speaking parents stayed at home, and it slowed down a bit. Then the grandparents came to visit, bringing more Spanish content, but even more, being the first people who didn't understand German. Yeah? So actually he had to make an effort to actually say German words, say Spanish words, and then we see this decrease in the number of German words for that month. Then he started kindergarten, and the German recovered, but then the grandparents visited again. So there was another dip in the German, and well, now that is pretty constant with lots of German words and Spanish, yeah, being there at the side. And I thought this one was the most interesting thing to look at. But then I got some ideas, and I took a look at the types of words. And for that, I used spaCy, and spaCy has this property or method of like extracting the part of speech category of the word. So this tells you, is this word a noun, a proper noun, a verb, adjective, preposition? To be completely honest, I tried this at the beginning, but at some point, like, my linguistic knowledge was like, what is this word? Is this a preposition? Is this I don't know. Yeah. So I did it with spaCy, and yeah, for each word, you get one category. And things that might not be very familiar are interjections. So interjections are these words that can serve as complete sentences, like yes, no, or oh, oops. Yeah? So all of these expressions are interjections. And we have adpositions are actually prepositions, so family of prepositions. And we have, I think determiners. So determiners are like articles or particles that change nouns. And what we see here is that, of course, it starts with proper nouns, yeah, names, then with nouns, and then, what do you think comes next? Verbs, yeah, right? Always like, should be verbs. It's not verbs. So adjectives, adverbs, determinants, interjections, and then comes something strange and weird from the German language, that's verb particles. So if you speak German, if you like close the door, it's like zu machen. The particle is a zu. And what kids say is they just say the particle. So they don't say zu machen, but just zu or auf or hoch. And this has the effect that the verbs come very late. Yeah? So almost 1 year after starting talking, the verbs start appearing. Then the auxiliary verbs, like darf ich, blah, 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 or something that like makes you like build more complex sentences. Particles, like model particles, like doch or nur, or things that like more advanced speakers say. Conjunctions, which is actually super interesting because this is what gives you the ability to make complex sentences. Prepositions, finally. And the last thing to appear, which is very funny, is articles. They are the das, yeah? So there is like no apparent content there, so actually it's just a grammatical structure, so it's really not important if you put it in or if you say it correctly. It's also good news for all of us non-German native speakers who cannot nail them correctly all the time. And the last plot has actually the amount of these new words per type. Oops, this animation is kaput. So we do have the explosion of nouns. The verbs come later, but they start catching up quickly. Same with adjectives and adverbs. And all these other little words, there's just like a finite amount of these words, prepositions, conjunctions, etc. But once you have so many, then you can build sentences, yeah? And this was my mark of the kid actually speaks in full sentences. Yes, so if you're ever in this pipeline looking for some inspiration and to get your love back for the data analysis skills, I highly recommend working on personal data projects. And if you happen to come from other fields and just have coding skills, personal data projects are also a great way to get inspired and come to us into the data world. With this, I finish. Here are my contacts again. Thanks for listening.
Thanks a lot for your presentation, Paula. It was really entertaining. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, we have a few questions on Slido. The first question from Lucia. How do you deal with privacy and consent when using personal data of friends related for your projects in terms of data storage, processing, etc.?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and that's also why I don't use data are not right now for me or my family that have the consent. And so far, all the data that I was using was local. But I have been thinking, and especially in this last project, and talking with my linguistic friends, it was like we have to make an app out of this, because we could enable people to give this, but around the thinking of how to store your data, how to enable this, this is what's, apart from time, this is what keeps us from actually doing that. So the solution, I don't save the data, and I don't take data from nobody that's not in my immediate field.
Yeah, thank you. We have a second question. How did you collect your child's words?
Yeah, really, it was in the phone. I have like a spreadsheet app, and the moment I noticed I was like date and word. This was really easy at the beginning, but then especially when he entered kindergarten, yeah, then you lose a lot of contact time with the kid, and you have to be very, very, very attentive, really writing. And at some point I also saw that there were lots of duplicates and things missing, of course, because once it starts accelerating, you miss for sure words. I've seen a TED talk where a linguistic researcher was doing this very professionally, and he had microphones and cameras in his place. And then he was analyzing the data. I'm not that professional, so it was really just with a simple spreadsheet. Yeah.
Thank you. Other question from Lisa. What is your definition of a sentence? Where did you draw the line between complex clauses and sentences when saying the kid starts speaking in sentences?
Yeah, well, it was a very amateur definition of like, oh, now I have the feeling that are sentences, and for the complex clauses, it's when conjunctions actually appear. So, but this is something I learned from researchers, not my linguistic knowledge. Yeah. But that line of, I have the feeling now he speaks in sentences, is really this mother feeling of like, oh, wow. So milestone arrived, achieved. So,
Thank you. Other question. Do you have a strategy how to kill a prototype that made it into production but was never production ready?
So nothing is production nothing. So I think the farthest the thing come are like things that I present at conferences. Yes, so I do have a cemetery of notebooks on projects of things that I don't use, and there's no strategy there.
Thanks a lot. We still have questions for 1 or 2 questions in the audience. If you have, yeah, I have a question.
Your latest data collection project now?
I just finished analyzing this, so there's no one there. So I am thinking actually of making a nice Streamlit app out of the linguistic data, and so this friend actually wants to start like actually small project to validate theoretical linguistic research with empirical data for language acquisition. So I guess this is what we'll do next. But yeah, it's not in November yet, so ask me next year, and I might have come with new ideas.
Is there a particular time period that you could recommend for personal projects? Because I noticed that the one that you showed was over a very long time, and it might become, over time.
Yes. No. So I don't plan this so much. They just like appear when out of need. And I would like to work on these things more, but of course there's just so much time that you have. So what do? You start collecting data, and whenever you have a deadline, because you need something or a talk, then you just really have to analyze it and make nice plots. Yeah, but I don't plan this. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have you involved your partner in collecting the words data?
I tried, but that's your thing. Like I want to see the insights, but this is your thing. I do the board games, so it's yeah. Yeah.
Do you plan on collecting any more data about your child? Maybe like is he walking around right now? And is there any physical stuff that you do?
Yes, but no. So I think for now I finished.
Yeah, I might have a last question. Mm-hmm. Are you using your model to choose the next board game, or?
That's a very good idea. Not yet. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, Paula, for this presentation.